Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes on what I hope will be a very nice Saturday. It's hard to tell. It's still dark outside. God, this time of year is grim, isn't it? Anyway, in order to lighten the spirits, I'd like to begin the day with a lighter story, one we can laugh at. And it involves Glasgow's much maligned and pretty useless low emission zone. A zone designed not so much for low emissions, but just to keep poor people out of the city. But they've made a bit of a mistake, a bit of a boo-boo, and it's resulted in quite a lot of drivers, 1,300 or so, not going to be fined, not going to be able to claim the money back. And that'll be upsetting, because old Two Seats needs that money, doesn't she? Those international flights don't pay for themselves. It's all down to the good people of Glasgow. And so they've done this thing where they were supposed to send these out by registered mail. They didn't. They then tried to send them out by registered post rather than just normal post. Unfortunately, this also has proved to be a bit of a cock-up because it's taken so long they've gone over the statutory notice period. Honestly, these fellas couldn't run a whelk stall. We'll take a look, see what's going on and see why this again is so embarrassing for the SNP-run Glasgow Council and all the idiots they employ. Here goes. So, SNP-led Glasgow City Council's latest low-emission zone cock-up sees hundreds of relieved drivers dodging those fines. Quite right too. And all because they can't even follow their own damn rules. How hard can it be? You see, again, it's them trying to save money everywhere, trying to shave pennies here, pennies there. Well, it's ended up costing them an absolute bloody fortune. Good. More than 1,300 motorists did not get fined for breaking the low emission zone restrictions in Glasgow after a mishap from the Nationalist Local Authority led them to using the wrong postal method. And it isn't hard, it's actually written in it. But hey, this is Glasgow's SNP party. What are you expecting? You wouldn't say SNP party, would you? That would be Scottish National Party party, but you know what I mean. Although if you ever go to Battersea Power Station on the London Underground, you do go to Battersea Power Station Station. Very weird. Anyway, Glasgow City Council's gaff-prone handling of its low-emission zone has been blasted again after it was revealed that hundreds of relieved motorists, 1,300 motorists, dodged fines after a monumental mistake. The SNP-led local authority became the first to implement restrictions on older vehicles being driven into the city centre. Not necessarily dirty vehicles, just the sort of vehicles that poor people drive who can't afford to upgrade. So it's not anything that's designed to keep the air clean. It's designed to keep the area a bit more upmarket. Gentrification. Let's tax the poor. Punish the poor. How dare they be poor? Punish them. But officials messed up by sending out fines by non-tracked post, which means just normal mail, doesn't it? Which meant they were not legally enforceable. With this impact, all punishments from June to October, it's meant that more than 1,300 drivers have escaped the punitive measures, as their notices have been written off, as they have to be because they are illegal. We've previously told how the Transport Appeal Tribunal for Scotland said that fines could not be enforced if they were not served using recorded or registered post. And this sparked a change in policy by the council, who now send them out via this method. Now, of course, the only thing is, if you have to sign for it, you just simply don't sign. Then you've never received it. Simple, isn't it? Anyway, but during the transition, and this is where it all goes completely wrong, of course, because, morons. During the transition from non-tracked to tracked post, 1,388 fines timed out, as they were not served within the 28 days of the low emission zone breach. They were then not reissued, but a local authority spokeswoman insisted there was no obligation to refund penalties which have already been paid. So if you've paid it, tough. All notices are now sent by tracked post, which means they need to be paid, with the council saying that it was appealing against the tribunal decision. Well, you can appeal, but it won't do you any good because the law is actually very specific on it. It is the latest mishap to befall the SNP administration, as dozens of its vehicles have been banned from the city centre, leading them to fork out to hire compliant ones. Again, no guarantee that the new ones are any cleaner than the old ones. But there's an awful lot of money being wasted, isn't it? Because these people are morons. Yes, let's get all the dirty vehicles out of the crate. Yeah, well, what do you have to define as dirty vehicles? Well, vehicles owned by poor people. You know, because I can drive through Glasgow tomorrow in a 6.3 litre Mercedes Benz, and it's absolutely fine, mind you. You drive through in a 1 litre Vauxhall Corsa that just happens to be a day older than the cut-off date. You get the fine. That's because you're poor and can't afford a 6.3 litre Mercedes. That's the punishment for being poor, you see. More punishment. And of course, the thing is, as a percentage of earnings, it's regressive, because that fine to someone who's on a low wage is a much, much higher percentage of income than the fine to someone who's on £1 million a year. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Anyway, the Scottish Tories called on the other councils who are bringing in the low emission zones next summer to take heed of the numerous mistakes in Glasgow. Yeah, first of all, by setting it up. It's not actually needed. If you truly want to clean the air in Glasgow, get the buses off the road. Dundee, Aberdeen and Edinburgh will be restricting drivers in 2024, although no one knows why, because these places are actually very, very clean. And it isn't as though they're taking, like I say, dirty vehicles off the road. They're only taking older vehicles off the road. Not necessarily the same thing, is it? Scottish Conservative Shadow Transport Secretary Graham Simpson, that he above, there we go, said that this is the latest in a series of substantial cock-ups in relation to Glasgow SNP Green's led low emission zone scheme. They ignored the concerns of businesses, local residents and visitors to the city, and they rushed ahead with implementing this policy so that they could be seen to be doing something, so they could virtue signal, so they could have their little circle jerk of greeniness. And yet, it does absolutely nothing for the environment. It punishes poor people. It is ruining businesses because the footfall is falling, especially in the evenings. It's costing the local taxpayer millions upon millions because perfectly good and serviceable and clean vehicles have to be replaced for no reason whatsoever, because morons in the SNP don't understand that emissions is not the same as age. What a bunch of dicks. But this, of course, in a city where the only part of the city that is particularly bad, and even then still falls within the legally defined definition of clean air, is the bus station. Everywhere else, perfectly good. So we know that this is nothing to do with cleaning the air and everything to do with money. As I say, those flights, those international flights, don't pay themselves. Well, 2 seats does like to travel. The fact that they didn't think to track fines once they've been issued, he said, speaks volumes for how much the SNP Green Council in Glasgow have botched the low emission zones rollout. While this is a victory for hard-pressed motorists due to the council's blunder, they continue to be severely targeted by the scheme. And there's so many different ways around it, but basically, if you just go to the south of Ireland and buy a car in the south of Ireland, yeah, there you go. Bring it back on the ferry. Bob's your uncle. They can't fine you. What can they do about it? As other cities across Scotland prepare to roll it out next year, they must learn from the repeated errors Glasgow City Council have made before imposing hefty fines on all those who fall foul of their stupid rules. And since the low emission zone's introduction on the 1st of June, more than £25,000 fines have been issued, £500,000 being raised for Greggs mainly, I think. Greggs and flights. That's where it's all going, isn't it? A spokesperson for the council said poor air quality presents a serious risk to public health. Yes, it probably does. But Glasgow doesn't have poor air quality. Glasgow's got excellent air quality. That's by the government's own definitions. Seems odd. And it does go to show, of course, that none of this is to do with air. And it's all to do with raising lots and lots of lovely money for 2 seats and her gang of incompetent thievery crooks. Corrupt, inept, stupid councillors, basically. Oh well, I'll round up there. I'll come up, and that's the first one of the day out the way. It's a busy day. I only looked on and said, oh, I wonder what stories we've got today. Bish, 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 beep, 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 beep. Loads. Number 1's out the way. coming up. Glasgow's SNP run council is, of course, filled with idiots, fools, incompetents, the corrupt, the greedy, the nasty. But the worst of it is that this low emission zone is completely unnecessary, and it is, like I say, nothing to do with air and everything to do with money. It's a very cynical way of raising money. But what is particularly egregious about it is that they're actually targeting and deliberately targeting the worst off in society, the poorest in society, those who cannot afford better cars, those who are reliant upon the only cars that they can afford, maybe to go to work or to go shopping or whatever, and then they're punishing them. It's driving people out of the city, it's driving commerce away, and the thing is that the people who are most likely to vote SNP are the ones most likely to be affected by this ban. If only the people who voted SNP weren't as stupid as they obviously have to be to keep voting for them, this wouldn't happen. Any party in Glasgow now, coming up to the next council elections, any party in Glasgow that stood there, say the Tories, for example, and said, look, we understand the problems with this low emission zone. We understand it's an absolute, disaster. And we understand that it's affecting the poor the most. And we want to help the poor. So if we're voted in, we will abolish the low emission zone. Straight one, day one, it's gone. We'll go out and we'll tell the guys to start taking the signs down, start taking the cameras down. We don't care, we're not having it. Simply because we need to protect the most vulnerable and poorest in society. And doing this to them is not that. Bang, I guarantee they'd pick up votes for that. Much as people in Glasgow probably don't like the Tories, something like that, there'd be enough to swing, and who knows, you might lose a few SNP councillors, and that wouldn't be a bad thing, would it? They're already in deep trouble anyway, but if you can swing a few more, who knows? Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. First video of the day out of the way and done. Do please hit the subscribe button, massively helps the channel. Do please hit the like button, helps the video. And until next time, stay safe, stay well, and I will speak to you later. Bye.